Thank you very much for joining us, everyone. This is the 12th lesson within the 18 that make up the developer training that we've arranged for 2023 and 2024. This is programming for the advanced email manager, and we're going to be looking at a number of different topics within the training today, but it is only scratching the surface of what is something of a very complex, very useful, and somewhat underused tool within inside the Sage CRM toolset. Now, after this, we are going to be looking on to the different web service APIs and the .NET API and self-service, but all of these lessons interact. They all look back on each other and some of the topics that we've been exploring in the earlier lesson, and that's the same today as we look at the advanced mail manager. So what I'm going to do in this lesson is to look at how the email manager works and processes emails, how we can go about understanding what is happening as that process takes place, so that we can then see how we in turn can create our own template and how we can pass parameters to it, including new functions and new behaviors, and what the scope of those behaviors are, so that the impact of both the scope of reference and the scope of effect is going to be. We'll look at how we can assemble a template so that we can then have it create a brand new piece of business action. Now, everything that I covered today is documented. You can check this out within the context of the Sage CRM Help Center. There's full documentation on email management within the context of the System Administration Guide. And if you also want to find out about things, then it is also very easy to be able to ask Sage CRM Ally to help as you are trying to construct templates, as you're trying to work out what to do with the configuration of Sage CRM. There's also a set of videos to expand on this further. So they talk about different topics. Some of them are very much on the reminder on how to create a template, how to go about using a template as well. And I'll be talking about some of the jargon that I've already started to slip into, like the idea of the email template. But in all of what we're doing here, there are other resources as well to back up the education. So you can go on to the community hub at sage.com, so communityhub.sage.com. Have a look down inside the hints, tips and tricks blog and within the CRM section, and you'll find that there are a number of different articles that are exploring the mail manager as well. Everything from a high-level view to it through to how you go about using modern authentication to connect Mail Manager to Exchange Online. Another set of resources that is very useful to access, you can find on community.sagecrm.com. This is the download site, really, where a whole set of different resources are found. And that includes, by the way, the SDK installer. So if you have gone through and used the SDK installer, one of the useful things about that is that it provides us with JavaScript snippets useful for creating the scripts files that are used by the mail manager to process inbound emails. And that's the templates that we've been talking about. So in terms of what we're going to look at now in order to achieve our objectives for this session, is that we're going to look at how we would go about familiarizing ourselves with a number of different areas. So how do we go about ensuring that we've got, first of all, a test email server and an email client that we can check to see all of the accounts and familiarize ourselves with the way in which emails can be sent, received, and we can check everything's working there. And then how do we go on to understand the architecture of Sage CRM and the registry settings that are needed within inside CRM? How do we check that there's no conflict associated with registry settings? How do we understand the role of the services, the role of the templates themselves, and how the templates are linked into the user interface of Sage CRM through the use of translations that reference the functions inside those templates? And how do we write our templates and our script files in order to be well structured and easy to be able to maintain into the future? And that's the idea of the structuring of a template file. And that leads us to the point where we'll be able to be confident in our ability to test the receipt of an email and the automatic reply to the email. The first thing that we have to do is to set up an environment that we can use to test our understanding of the mail manager. You can, of course, try and connect to your own organization's exchange or corporate mail server, but you may find that people take a dim view of trying to send a lot of learning emails. Certainly it was one of my first hard learning points around Sage CRM, having my manager explain that I had upset everyone by connecting to the mail manager 22 years ago, and spamming people within the organization and outside the organization as well. So I learned a lesson that it's best to have your own mail manager mail service, and there are a number of different mail services that I've used in the past, and that's VPOP3, Mail Enable, but the one that is the easiest to probably use, and the one that I've used for today's training, is HMail Server. An HMail Server is very useful because it allows us to be able to set up our own little encapsulated mail environment that isn't communicating out to the outside world. It can do. It's a mail server proxy. It can then route out as necessary. But here you can see that I'm able to set up multiple domains within the context of the HMail server. I'm using here straight away the demo information within inside Sage CRM. So I've got two domains for demos, sagecrm.com, and I've also got a demo domain for panoplytech.com as well for the internal users of Sage CRM. And that would be also the email accounts that are to be monitored by the mail server. So I can set that up. I can set up all of the accounts that I want to use. You can see here that I've got not only the administrator's account and a standard user like Susan May, but I've also got sales and support, which are organizational accounts that I would want the mail manager to monitor and to be able to process. The next thing that you need to do is to be able to work with a simple HTML email client in order to separate my life from my work life from the test environment and the training environments that I use. I tend to use Mozilla Thunderbird. It works very neatly and can be set up very neatly with the accounts for HMail server, and so I can send emails backwards and forwards, proving that everything is working all right in terms of the sending and receipt. And you can go a long way of ensuring that if this is working all right, then there's not the interference and blocking from an antivirus software or other filtering software within your corporate environment. And you may want to actually, as you're learning this, to find a machine that is completely isolated and is inoculated against the corporate environment. The architecture of Sage CRM, which is something that we've looked at right at the beginning of our series of training sessions, looks at where the services fit into the overall shape of the system. And of all of the services, this is the second one that we're looking at in any sense. So we've looked at the escalation service earlier on. Now we're looking at the idea of the mail manager, which has to run in the background. It's a service, it will be operating, and it needs to be able to log on into Sage CRM and also log on and handle the connection through to the mail server. So it needs to be able to be configured both to work with Sage CRM and the mail server, and it needs to be able to do this 24/7 when no one is logged on into the system. So it has to be able to have access to, say, Sage TM, Sage CRM, where it can then look at other credentials that it can then use to be able to carry out the actions that it needs to. Here you can see that the service is running on my machine. It's a CRM email manager. By default, it's installed as a manually started service that you can then choose to turn on. And within a debugging environment, it's a good idea to actually leave that as a manual so that you can turn it on to see it operating, and if necessary, when you're finding that the behavior isn't quite as you expected it, you can turn it off and then you can reconfigure and then you can start the service once more. Each of the stops and starts of the service will then have a potential echo out into the notifications within the logs, and we'll talk about logs in a little bit. So the overall behavior of the advanced email manager is to have this service monitoring what's going on in an account, an email account. So a customer would send an email. That email arrives at a monitored email box. The mail manager will read the email and then process it according to a set of instructions contained within the script file. We call these script files the templates, and they are just straightforward JavaScript syntax files. We will look later on at how that there are some specific objects passed into the environment, so that there is a question that we need to be, or there is an awareness that we need to have about the scope of reference and the scope of effect that we can have using the script files. But basically that script file can then have the mail manager carry out a whole set of tasks within Sage CRM. It might be that an inquiry takes place and an email response is completed and sent back to the customer if the email was a question. It could be that the email comes in and what we do here is that we process the email according to a set of instructions that that adds a new case or a new support issue into CRM, notifies the user, and then sends a reply back to the customer with that particular case reference ID. These automated behaviors can be as swift or as complex as we need, and sometimes they will be able to interact with other rules within inside Sage CRM. So a little bit later on, I'll be showing you how it will have reacted and interacted with a simple notification, for example, displaying a message onto the user's screen that they have a new item of work to look at. The services are common to all instances of Sage CRM. And that being said, we only expect within the context of a production environment there being one instance of Sage CRM on a machine. So we don't support multiple instances of CRM on a production environment, but if you're doing this in a test environment, in a training environment, or an experimentation environment, then you may have multiple CRMs, but you'd only ever have one instance of the services. And you'll find those down in underneath program file Sage CRM. So that's the level above the instance that you've got underneath services. And if we look down into services, we can see that we can identify that the services are covering a whole range of different services, including our escalation service, the integration service that might be there from a legacy point of view, or where we'll have the indexer as well. You'll notice that you've got the email manager.exe file there. That's the service that we're interested in, and there are other folders in there as well for the logs and the custom pages, which is where the logs and the script files will be found that we'll be talking about and showing later on. So our services are found underneath Program Files, Sage CRM Services, emailmanager.exe. If there are some registry settings that you can examine, and you can find these under HKey local machine system current control set services, and they're the ones for the escalation service and the email. But in fact, the key ones are actually underneath the main CRM instance. Now, this may become something that you have to think about if you have installed multiple instances of Sage CRM on the same server, because you can only have the one instance of the mail manager. Here, the server will have a set of emails, a set of credentials stored within inside the registry. I'll look at the interface element of that in a moment. But it does mean that you may need to look through the config area for CRM within the environment and remove any old versions of any old references to the EM credentials that are stored there. Let's go back and remind ourselves of what's happening to when we're working with the mail manager. Mail manager has to connect to both CRM, and it has to be able to connect to the mail server to be able to do the auto replies and to read and to connect the auto replies. In terms of setup and configuration for the mail manager, you can find all of this within inside the administration area, email and documents. And we can go down then into where we're looking at the advanced email management server options. It's here that the settings reference the settings within inside the registry. So this is where Sage CRM writes back into the registry so that the service can access those elements when it's running. We can see that we're controlling the administration, the user that the mail manager logs on as and runs as to have those credentials. It needs to have administration rights. It doesn't need to be the admin user. It needs to be able to write into all territories and to be able to do any work anywhere within the system, because it will be doing it as another user and assigning work to any other user within the system as well. You can decide whether or not that you are turning debugging on by default, and you can control the interval. I think 3 minutes is actually the lowest interval that you can have, so the lowest polling interval, but you can then change that to anything else that you want. And from a performance perspective, you may want to change the interval so it is not hitting the server so often. We come and use these settings to design our own template references and to our monitoring the account within a screen for email management server options here. So I've started to create the definition to look at an account. We'll be working through this in a little bit more detail as we define our own instance, but this in my environment has already been set up, and you can see that I've defined what I'm logging, what monitoring of which email account that I'm monitoring, and you can see as well how I'm connecting. Now the options that if I want to connect via OAuth 2, modern authentication, these are all documented inside help, and there's the associated blog articles as well to guide you through that. So all of the different options are documented, but the ones that I want to point out from a particularly special point of view about the operation of the templates and how everything joins together is really these two. This is to do with the template that we're accessing and then the function that we're calling. So what we can see in our screen is that we've set this up to monitor our particular account. We've passed in the credentials that we need to use to be able to both, in my case, POP3 and SMTP. And you can see that I have associated that the work is going to be carried out as if it's the system administrator. And you can see as well that the default user that any work is going to be assigned to is also defined. Now, these are all parameters that as Sage, the Sage email advanced email manager processes, it's going to use these settings to pass them as parameters into the environment in which the script file will operate. So it will know some defaults straight away. So when it assigns to a user, it knows whose it's going to assign it to, for example. And you don't have to define some of these things. You can actually handle everything within inside the template file, but this is a convenient way of passing parameters at a level of the user interface to allow you to control the way in which the template is used. But you'll notice that I do have a template name there, and I do have a function name there as well. It's the default rule set action, and that is actually the rule set is the function inside the script file. By default, there are 3 templates shipped with Sage CRM. The 2 that are documented and called out explicitly as example templates that are documented are communications and support. Template is a version of the support is a version of the support file and is really there just so that you can trash it and change it in any way that you like, to use it as a model for your own templates and your own script files. Personally, I think it's easier to start from scratch and to use the SDK examples to assemble the structure of a template. That's a matter of preference. You might want to start from something and change it, or you start from scratch and build up. Now, but it gives us that idea that there is going to be a script file that is ready. It allows us to think now into what that script looks like. And here you can see that it is just JavaScript. It is just JavaScript. And in this particular case, you'll see that it's referencing there a function called create case. Create case is linked and identified as what's called a main action within the template, and there is a tie into the user interface so that you can say, well, I want to use this main function or that main function, and that main function is passed as a parameter into the template to know which function should be called and executed by the advanced mail manager. To do that, we will use translations, and we'll see that a little bit later on, how we configure to pass the parameter that we want to use into the script environment. And that idea of passing things into the template allows us to really get back into the idea that in nearly all of the scripting environments within CRM, we have to consider the scope of reference and the scope of effect. So the scope of reference is what can I see? What can I evaluate what's passed to me? And then the scope of effect is what can I change? In the scope of reference for the mail manager, you can probably start to work out that one of the objects that you're going to be passed is most definitely going to be the email itself. You're also then going to be passed some other things where the email address that has been monitored has been pre-processed to a certain extent to be able to establish whether this email has come from a particular company, person, or in fact, or it's come from a user. So it will have a number of different pre-processing to work out what about this particular user. The API objects that it can reference and then use in order to make effect is very wide. So in fact, we can do just about anything that we want in the context of CRM. The only things that we aren't really able to do is anything to do with the interface. So we're not using any visual elements, but of course we can access translations, we can access the database, we can access any of the ability to make or change things within inside CRM. It can have a very, very wide scope of reference, including being able to take advantage of connections to third-party databases and to be able to make changes into those other database connections, because you're riding on the connections that are defined within Sage CRM. The massive amount of change that can take place within Sage CRM. So let's say we send an email. Here I'm composing a customer support email, and that's coming from Susan May, and it's coming from Simon Yaltoy, I think, Simon Yaltoy of Gatecom, and so that goes off, and it's going to be processed, and it's going to be filed as a new case underneath the customer, and it's going to be filed according to the script that's inside the template. So it will be filed as an email in. It will be, or its source has been as an email, and it will have a number of default settings that the script defines. It would appear as well underneath any of the normal lists of communications, but you'll notice here as well that there's been a notification triggered. So when we send an email that is processed and stored within Sage CRM, both as the email message plus the associated main entity, not just the communication, but the case, the opportunity, whatever we're doing inside Sage CRM, we can trigger then other behavior like escalation rules or table level scripts, etc., to do further work. And this idea that we can have all of the different rule types that we've looked at right at the beginning of the training course in terms of, is this going to be something that is a manipulative rule or a corrective rule or whatever? All these types of rules can be carried out by the mail manager. So going back into what we were looking at, we have a mail manager being able to do a wide range of tasks depending on the definition of our scripts that are contained within this template file. The emails that are sent in, we can monitor any number of accounts, each having their own associated script, each being monitored on an interval, and then carrying out the work that we want, and that interaction with CRM can go out into third-party databases as well, both for reference and effect. We can send automated replies straight back to the sending customer as the email is processed. We can reference information within inside the sending the newly created entities in CRM. So for example, if we create a case and automatically reply, we can actually take the reference ID from the case and put it into the email and send it back. So it's a matter of sequencing. If we've committed the database, committed the new case, we can take the reference and send it back. And what's more, we have the power to be able to parse the inbound email to see whether there is key information that we need in order to route the email in a particular way within inside the template. So for example, we may want to monitor the email account to see whether the inbound emails contain a case reference or an opportunity or a keyword to be able to do that. Now this opens up all sorts of opportunities within inside the mail manager. You could use a set of Bayesian logic functions to be able to associate keywords with certain behaviors. So you could identify inbound emails as being complaints or product inquiries and handle them accordingly. So if they have mention of needing to return something, then you know that when you associate and create a case, it's associated with the returns material authorization workflow. But let's have a look though at the process of creating our own template. And it is steady as you go. You know, you've got to learn how to write the basic templates before you start exploring with very advanced and complex tasks for this. But here you'll see that it's actually not so difficult in order to achieve quite profound effects. So what do we have to do? We have to get to the point where we are able to test and be happy that we can receive and reply to an email. And we have to understand where our templates are defined, how we interact with those templates and structure them, and how we link the templates and the functions within the templates, those rule sets, into the user interface. So what do we have to do? This is going to be the worked example that I'll share with you. The idea that a customer can send an email inquiry in, that the sales account is monitored by the advanced mail manager. The script processes the mail manager, the monitored email, and creates a lead or an opportunity inside Sage CRM. A sales agent is assigned, and then an auto reply could be generated, or you could wait for the user, the new internal CRM user, to do the reply. So that's the basic outline of what we'll look at in the rest of this session. So our starting point is inside our scripting environment. Here I'm using Visual Studio again. I'm starting to create for myself a new JavaScript file, and I'm outlining and using the snippets because I've got the SDK installed. I'm going to use the snippets contained within there to go and create the skeleton, the outline of my template. Now, as I look to these script files that I'm creating, if I save that back now into the correct location, it will be automatically available to me in any further definition of a template environment, the server options to manage a particular account. So I'm going to create a new sales template. I'm going to save it down into CRM services, custom pages, scripts as sales.js. That template will then be immediately available and visible for when I come on to creating my own email management server options area to monitor the particular account. And we're going to see that there is a basic structure to a template file. And there is this outline structure is documented within inside the as it says here in the system administration guide. But you have this idea of a comment section, which is reminding people what are the objects passed into the template, the initialization of certain variables, which would include things like which user are we working with, which is the default team. This is associated with any of those parameters from the server option, the email management options page that we'll have defined for this monitored email account. And then it goes on into the sections where you have the main functions. These are the event functions associated with before the main actions and then after the actions. These are event functions similar to the idea of page load and page unload. We also have a main function area which we can define. Now you don't interestingly have to use that. You can. The communications example only puts all of its communications.js, the example file there, only ever uses the before main action. But the support.js file uses this concept of the main function. And so the main function is something that is where that's the defined element that you want to go into. So that's why we're reading this. It's very much the link into the user interface. One of the tips is that you never call any of the functions that you're working with main action, because that would cause a problem for you. And then you can also have within the structure of the page utility functions, which are never going to be directly referenced from the user interface, but are there in order to do the tasks in terms of parsing strings, or perhaps saving the actual communication, the email as a communication record, or doing any of the other work, but they themselves wouldn't be directly called. Our templates have to have a recognition of the fact that there is a scope of reference and a scope of effect, and every scope of reference, the script file is going to remind you what its scope of reference is by the passed in variables, and the scope of effect is the set of API choices that are appropriate for the mail manager. Here you can see I'm looking at the top of my new script file that I've started to write. This is all the commenting that takes place right at the beginning, but you'll notice that it has got a whole set of reminders of saying that there are a number of objects that are passed into the script namespace directly that we can immediately reference. That's about the user query, the person query, the company query. These are grabbing hold of the information to see whether that particular email address has been identified. And you can see that it's also got some other objects to handle the message as well as the email itself. And you have the main eWare or CRM object as well. So these are the objects that are available in the template straight away. You'll find that in terms of the template definitions, there would be a few redefinitions. So for standardization, the eWare object is renamed the CRM object, and you can see here where we are defining the variables that we would expect to receive from the inbound instantiation and the creation of the script environment where immediately objects are within our namespace. As we look at this, we might notice inside the files that I'm looking at, so inside there you can see that I've got where I've got a message handler to carry out some logging. You'll notice that I've made use of the before main function and after main function. This is simply to remind me that these functions exist, and that's why I've included the use of the logging there. Logging is a useful, very useful thing within the context of the mail manager to remind you where are you, what have you done, where are you, and where are you within the process. And all this will be written out into the logs as we're running and using the monitoring of the email accounts. For every email that is picked up, this would be processed and handled. And the debugging is something that we can do outside or inside the template. So we can turn debugging on straight away and have everything written out. We can also turn on the debugging inside the script file as well. And as I've mentioned, you can use a good trick is to say, well, I'm just about to start, I'm just about to do it, or I'm doing it and then I've just done it as well. Type messages to help you orientate yourself where you are within the execution of the code. So debugging messages are very useful things to have. And in terms of when we come on to the monitoring of the files, when you start to think about where this is, you'll find all of the logs down underneath the program file Sage CRM services logs. Underneath underneath there, the date prefix CRM mail manager.log, and it will look something like this with the rules script.js being written out, showing you, excuse me, showing you the parameters that have been passed, and then showing you the behavior that is being shown as well. Now, I'm only in this particular lesson looking at the assumption that we're dealing with one main set of rules passed in. There's really quite a lot of complexity around the Mail Manager, and if this is something that people want to know more about and explore about sort of advanced use, then we can arrange that. That's something that we'd be very happy to do. But the logs files contain records of everything that has been passed in, so you know that there should be a tie-in with the behavior that your script is using. And the errors that occur is generated to throw out the script that has caused the error into the log as well. So the log file will contain the script and the error information, and the section where the script has failed would be highlighted as well. Now, if there has been an issue with any email problems, there is a rogue email folder as well that you can investigate as well, which you down underneath the script area. But going back into our definition of templates, let's assume that we are wanting to construct our template to do this sales inquiry management. You can use then the SDK scripts to allow us to drop in a little bit more information. Here I am come down into the main into the section of my outline to go into the main function, and I'm dropping in a new function, which is going to be my example main function, which in this case is actually a sales inquiry function. So it's got a name that we're defining and information about what tasks it is expecting to do. So here you can see that what it's doing is writing out a little log message to say that it's just about to start the main function. It's then looking at to see whether the person is known. If the person is known or not known, different actions, a different path is taken, and we can see that there's two potential functions, whether it's create lead or create communication or create opportunity, and create opportunity, create com linked into the opportunity as well. So we different paths that we're taking here. The template that we've saved, that we go ahead and save now, is straight away available when we come on to defining a new email address being monitored by the email management server options. So if this is a new one, and you can see here where we're looking at sales at panoplytech.com, there is that option down in the template area where sales is present. It's immediately available. So it's not a definition that you have to do. It is reading live from the folder. But if we want that function to be used, then we have to do something else. Now, we have to have a function. That function, which is our sales inquiry function, has to be linked between the interface and the template file. And the trick that we use to do this is through translations. So we're going to use custom captions in order to do that. And all of the functions that are available to you inside the Mail Manager definitions, management options, are defined as translations belonging to the caption family JS functions. We need to add our new function, and you can see that I've come now into the translations area of Sage CRM, coming into administration, customization, translations. I'm looking for my caption family JS functions, and you can see I've got the three existing functions of case tracker, create case, and create comms. Now, when we come to define our own, you can see that I've created this as sales inquiry. Do you notice that I've said sales inquiry, open close brackets with the semicolon? I am writing a statement in here because when we invoke this function, that's what we're invoking. And we need to be able to pass that into the template. So that's the name of the function. It has to match then the function available, and it would then be accessible inside the default rule set action drop-down. So our action then becomes something that we can select. If we've got the translation in, it becomes then available. And that then matches what we see inside our template file. So our template file is called sales.js, and we've got a function here called sales inquiry. That function is going on to do a range of different tasks. It's looking at the idea of creating an opportunity or creating a lead. These are all straightforward. So these are all things that we have actually seen done in other contexts. So we've seen the idea of creating a record object, both within table level scripts and within inside a discussion of the COM-ASP API. What you'll notice is that you are able to access objects which you don't have inside the other API options, and that is, like, we have an email object that we're accessing. We have a person query that we're accessing. So these are the passed into our namespace that we're referencing within the context of the template. And you'll see that you can see that the opportunity description is email.subject.substring, and grabbing hold of just the first 40 characters of the value of the description. So that's so far so good, because you can see that the interaction between the passed in 6 objects that are passed in to the namespace plus the standard in objects that we're used to using, which are also passed in to this environmental namespace environment. Create lead, very similar in its behavior. These are all functions that would be added into our template in the utilities or the helper functions, and that helper function element can go on to include the sending of the email as well. Now, the sending of the email raises the questions of what are the objects that we're using in order to do that, and this is down to a different object for emails that you can access with inside ASP pages and the rest of the COM. This is a very distinct object, not available for the other APIs. It's only appropriate for the mail manager. This is the email object, and it has its in its own way a set of collections to allow it to build addresses and to allow it to deal with attachments as well. And that's the important one. Another important element is that the mail manager is able to handle inbound attachments, and it's also possible to assemble outbound attachments as well that can then be included with the email to send back out. So our email object can be sent and returned. automatically, which is very good. We have all these different objects as well that we can also use. These are documented inside the System Administration Guide and also in the Developer Guide. So have a look at those in the reference area of the Developer Guide. And these are things that will then allow you to get to the stage where you can properly say that you have been able to set up a test environment to be able to use all of these aspects of the aspects of the Advanced Mail Manager. Today, we've gone through a session that has looked at the questions around setting up a test environment, making sure that we've got a server and an email client that we can use to prove that we're sending emails backwards and forwards to ourselves. We've looked at the architecture of this, where the services sit and how they run. We've looked at the registry settings, and we've understood how we control those settings through the user interface. We've looked at the template file locations, and we've looked at how we link the functions or the rule sets inside those templates with the user interface through the use of translations, and we've discussed the structure of the template files, which leaves us in the position, I hope, that you'd be able to be confident now to be able to go away, test and trial this to be able to get to a point where you can demonstrate that you can receive and reply automatically to emails using the Advanced Mail Manager. That just about wraps up everything that I wanted to cover today. We're going to carry on our journey through the API options and development options of Sage CRM as we go into our next lessons, which are looking at the SOAP and the REST APIs. But let's see if anyone has got any questions now. Thank you, everyone. Goodbye. I'll see you on the next lesson.